In the depths of space, where civilizations rise and fall like waves against cosmic shores, there exists a peculiar truth that older species whisper in hushed tones. Humanity remembers everything. Not just victories or defeats, not just glory or shame, but every single act of kindness shown to them in their darkest hours. And when humans decide to repay a favor, entire star systems tremble at the magnitude of their gratitude. The Galactic Council learned this the hard way. They had dismissed humanity as just another primitive species, barely worth a footnote in their vast archives. But when the time came for humanity to honor an ancient debt, the galaxy discovered that underestimating human loyalty was perhaps the most dangerous mistake any civilization could make. This is the story of how one small act of compassion from a dying alien became the catalyst for the greatest military campaign in galactic history. A tale of how humanity's stubborn refusal to forget kindness would reshape the very fabric of interstellar politics and prove that sometimes the most terrifying force in the universe isn't hatred or greed, it's gratitude. The merchant ship Kethera drifted through the void like a dying whale, its hull breached in 17 places, atmosphere bleeding into space in crystalline clouds. Captain Zethki of the Valoran Republic clutched his wounded side, green blood seeping through his fingers as he watched his crew die around him. The pirate attack had been swift and merciless, leaving his vessel crippled and his cargo holds empty. Through the fractured viewport, he could see the sleek forms of human vessels approaching. Earth's third exploration fleet. If his failing sensors were correct, Zethki had heard stories about humans, young, aggressive, barely a century into space travel. Most galactic species considered them little better than pirates themselves, territorial and primitive. The Valoran Republic had voted against their admission to the Galactic Council just 2 years prior. As the lead human ship drew alongside, Zethki prepared for the worst. His people had taught him that humans were opportunistic scavengers who would strip his ship clean and leave his crew to die in the void. The communications system crackled to life, filled with static and the harsh sounds of the human language. Unknown vessel. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the UES Determination. We're reading massive hull breaches and life support failure. Do you require assistance? The universal translator struggled with the alien syntax, but the meaning was clear. Assistance, not demands for cargo or threats of violence. Zethki's secondary heart fluttered with something he hadn't expected to feel: hope. This is Captain Zethki of the merchant vessel Kithara. He transmitted back, his voice weak but steady. We've suffered pirate attack. Hull integrity compromised. 17 crew members injured, 5 critical. Our medical bay is destroyed. The response came immediately. Copy that, Kethera. We're deploying emergency response teams now. Maintain current position and prepare for emergency docking. Through his dimming vision, Zethki watched as the human ships moved with practiced efficiency. Unlike the sleek, elegant vessels of the established galactic powers, human ships were blocky, functional things, all armor plating and redundant systems. They looked like they'd been built for war, but their actions spoke of something else entirely. The first human to board the Kethera was a woman in environmental armor, her face visible through a transparent faceplate. She had the pale skin and dark hair common to her species, but it was her eyes that struck Zethki. They held a determination and compassion that he'd rarely seen outside his own species. I'm Dr. Martinez, she said through her suit's external speakers. Where are you wounded? Zethki tried to stand but stumbled. The human doctor caught him with surprising strength, her armored hands gentle despite their mechanical assistance. Take it easy, Captain. We got this. What followed was a display of efficiency and compassion that would remain burned into Zethki's memory for the rest of his long life. The humans didn't just stabilize his wounded crew. They transferred them to their own medical bay, sharing precious supplies and even compatible medicines from their emergency stores. Their doctors worked tirelessly, adapting their equipment to handle Valoran physiology they'd never encountered before. Dr. Martinez herself spent 18 hours straight working on Zethki's chief engineer, a young female named Silera who had taken shrapnel to her primary organs. The human medical team tried every technique in their arsenal, even jury-rigging a life support system from spare parts when standard equipment proved incompatible with Valoran biology. Captain Chun visited Zethki in the human medical bay as he recovered. She was younger than he'd expected, with prematurely gray hair and calloused hands that spoke of a life spent in space. Her uniform bore the scars and patches of countless voyages. "Your engineer is stable," Chun reported, settling into a chair beside his bed. "Dr. Martinez thinks she'll make a full recovery, though it'll take time." Zethki studied the human captain with his large, golden eyes. "Why?" he asked simply. Chun tilted her head. "Why what? Why help us? Your species and mine are not allies. The Valoran Republic opposed your admission to the Galactic Council. We have no trade agreements, no mutual defense pacts. By all accounts, you should have left us to die or demanded payment for your aid." The human captain was quiet for a long moment, her dark eyes thoughtful. "Where I come from, Captain, we have a saying, there but for the grace of God go I. Space is big and empty and full of things that want to kill us. Pirates, cosmic radiation, engine failures, navigational errors. Any of us could be floating dead in the void tomorrow. If we don't help each other out here, who will?" She leaned forward, her expression earnest. "Besides, my grandmother always told me that kindness is never wasted. Even if it's not returned, it still matters. It still makes the universe a little better." Zethki felt his throat constrict with emotion. In the 70 years he'd spent trading among the stars, he'd encountered dozens of species, hundreds of worlds. The galaxy was full of civilizations that claimed to be enlightened, advanced, evolved beyond the primitive emotions that drove lesser species. Yet here was this young human, barely out of her home system, displaying a compassion that put them all to shame. "The repairs to your ship will take another 2 days," Chun continued. "We're fabricating replacement hull plates and updating your navigation computer with current pirate activity reports. No charge. No charge." Zitki's mandibles clicked in surprise. "Captain, the materials alone must be worth. Consider it a welcome gift," Chun interrupted with a smile. "Earth's first contact with the Valoran Republic. May it be the beginning of a long friendship." The next 2 days passed in a blur of activity. The human crews worked alongside Zethki's people, sharing meals, stories, and laughter despite the language barriers. Zethki watched his engineer, Silera, teaching a group of young human technicians about Valoran engine design while she recovered. The humans, in turn, showed her innovations in human metallurgy and power distribution that made her eyes shine with curiosity. Dr. Martinez checked on Zethki regularly, monitoring his recovery with the same care she'd show a member of her own species. She even shared pictures of her family, a husband and 2 young children waiting for her back on Earth. "They don't understand why I chose deep space medicine," she confided during one visit. "The pay is terrible, the hours are worse, and you never know when you'll see home again. But out here, you get to make a real difference. You get to be the reason someone makes it home to their family." On the final day, as the Kethera prepared to depart, Zethki met with Captain Chun one last time. His ship's hull gleamed with new plating, his engines hummed with improved efficiency, and his crew was healthy and whole. The humans had even restocked his medical supplies and provided him with updated star charts for the sector. "I don't know how to repay this kindness," Zethki said, his voice thick with emotion. Chun clasped his shoulder with one hand, a gesture of friendship among humans. "Just remember it, Captain. Remember that not everyone in this galaxy is out to hurt you. And maybe someday, if you see someone else in trouble." She left the sentence unfinished. Zethki nodded solemnly. "I will remember, Captain Chun. My people have long memories. We do not forget debts, especially debts of honor. Take care of yourself out there," Chun said. "And tell your people back home that humanity looks forward to better relations with the Valoran Republic." As the Kethera pulled away from the human fleet, Zethki stood on his bridge and watched the blocky human ships grow small in the distance. He had entered this encounter expecting death or exploitation. Instead, he had found something precious and rare, genuine compassion between strangers. He activated his ship's long-range communications array and began composing a detailed report for the Valoran High Command. Every action, every kindness, every moment of human compassion was carefully recorded. The Republic would know what these humans had done. They would know that Earth's children were not the savage pirates that galactic gossip had painted them to be. 3 months later, when the Kethera docked at Valoris Prime, Zethki's report sent shockwaves through the Republic's government. The High Council, which had voted against human membership in the Galactic Council, suddenly found themselves reconsidering their position. Trade delegations were quietly organized. Cultural exchange programs were discussed in closed sessions. But it was Silera, Zethki's young engineer, who would prove to be the most important consequence of that encounter. Her injuries had healed, but her fascination with human engineering had only grown. She requested transfer to the Republic's Xenotechnology Division and began an intensive study of human design principles. What she discovered would change everything. Human technology, she reported, was crude by galactic standards, but possessed an elegance of purpose that was breathtaking. Where other species built ships to impress, humans built them to endure. Where others prioritized efficiency, humans prioritized redundancy. Their vessels were ugly but nearly indestructible. Their weapons were simple but devastatingly effective. Their medical technology was primitive but adaptable to any species. They build like they expect the universe to try to kill them, Silera wrote in her official analysis. And they help others like they know the universe is trying to kill everyone. The Valoran Republic's opinion of humanity began to shift. When Earth applied for Galactic Council membership again the following year, the Republic not only voted in favor, but actively campaigned for human acceptance. Their representative, an elderly statesman named Korith VI, stood before the assembled delegates and told the story of Captain Zethki and the human fleet that had saved him. Some among us question whether humans are ready for galactic citizenship, Korith VI said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. They point to humanity's brief history in space, their primitive technology, their aggressive nature. But I submit to you that humanity possesses something far more valuable than advanced technology or ancient wisdom. They possess a fundamental decency that this galaxy has forgotten. The vote was closer than it should have been, but humanity was finally accepted into the Galactic Council. Captain Sarah Chun and Dr. Elena Martinez were among the first humans to set foot on Council Station, representing Earth at the induction ceremony. Zethki was there to meet them, now serving as the Valoran Republic's trade attaché to human space. "You kept your promise," he told Chun as they stood in the station's observation deck, watching Earth's blue-white star gleam in the distance. "You did make this the beginning of a friendship." Chun smiled, older now, but with the same kind eyes he remembered. "I told you kindness is never wasted. Sometimes it just takes time to grow into something bigger." Neither of them could have imagined just how prophetic those words would prove to be. In the months that followed, human-Valoran cooperation flourished. Trade routes were established. Joint scientific expeditions were launched. Human doctors began training in Valoran medical techniques, while Valoran engineers studied human design philosophy. But it was in the military sphere that the most significant changes occurred. The Galactic Council's peacekeeping force had always been more of a ceremonial organization than an effective military. Member species contributed token forces, but real conflicts were settled through economic pressure and political maneuvering. The idea of actually fighting for something, of sacrificing blood and treasure for a principle, was considered primitively human. Admiral Vashta of the Hegemony Navy learned this the hard way when human vessels began patrolling the trade routes. Pirates who had operated with virtual impunity for decades suddenly found themselves facing ships that fought with a fury and determination that was utterly alien to galactic warfare. Human captains didn't negotiate with pirates. They didn't offer terms or accept surrender. They simply destroyed them. The pirate fleets that had plagued the outer systems for generations were systematically hunted down and eliminated. Human ships, working in cooperation with Valoran intelligence networks, tracked down pirate bases and obliterated them. The message was clear: under human protection, merchant vessels were safe. Captain Zeth Key, now commander of a joint human-Valoran trade protection fleet, watched with amazement as space lanes that had been dangerous for decades became as safe as the core worlds. Human efficiency, combined with Valoran knowledge of local conditions, proved devastatingly effective against the criminal organizations that had profited from chaos. They fight like they have something to prove, observed Commander Solera, now serving as Zethkey's chief of staff. Like every battle is personal. Zethkey nodded, remembering his conversation with Captain Chen all those years ago. For them, it is personal. They remember what it feels like to be helpless in the void. They won't let it happen to others if they can prevent it. The transformation of the outer systems was so dramatic that other Galactic Council members began to take notice. Species that had dismissed humanity as crude barbarians suddenly found themselves asking for human protection for their own trade routes. The economic benefits were undeniable, but there was something else at work, something that made the older species uncomfortable. Humanity was changing the fundamental nature of galactic civilization. For millennia, the galaxy had operated on principles of careful neutrality and calculated self-interest. Species helped others only when there was clear benefit, and conflicts were resolved through complex negotiations and face-saving compromises. The idea of fighting and dying for strangers was not just foreign but actively discouraged. But humans brought with them a different philosophy. They formed emotional bonds with their allies. They took threats to their friends personally. They were willing to suffer losses to protect others, not out of calculated interest, but from genuine caring. The Valoran Republic found itself at the center of this cultural shift. Their alliance with humanity brought unprecedented prosperity and security, but it also brought responsibility. When human colonies were attacked, Valoran ships fought alongside them. When Valoran trade convoys were threatened, human vessels responded with overwhelming force. It was this growing partnership that would soon be tested in ways neither species could imagine. In the depths of space, ancient powers were stirring. The Kthara Empire, oldest and most powerful of the galactic civilizations, watched the human-Valoran alliance with growing concern. They had ruled through fear and manipulation for longer than human civilization had existed, and they recognized a threat to their dominance when they saw one. The stage was being set for a conflict that would shake the very foundations of galactic order. And at its heart would be a simple truth that Captain Shun had spoken years earlier. Kindness is never wasted. Sometimes it just takes time to grow into something bigger, something powerful enough to reshape the galaxy itself. The Kthara Emperor Vexnathi contemplated the holographic display floating before his throne with the patient malevolence of a creature that had ruled for over 3,000 years. The display showed the expanding influence of the human-Valoran alliance, their trade routes spreading like an infection across his carefully maintained empire. Red lines marked human patrol routes, blue dots indicated joint military bases, and green zones showed areas where piracy had been completely eliminated. Unacceptable, he hissed in the ancient Kthara tongue, his forearms gesturing dismissively at the projection. His courtiers, a collection of the galaxy's most powerful species, shifted nervously. The Kthara Emperor's displeasure was not something anyone wanted to experience firsthand. Lord Admiral Hextah, Supreme Commander of the Kthara Fleet, stepped forward. His species had served the Empire for 2 millennia, their natural aggression making them ideal enforcers. My Emperor, the humans are still a young species. Their technology is primitive, the numbers small. We could crush them easily. Could we? Vexnathi's voice carried the weight of ancient authority. They have destroyed pirate fleets that we allowed to operate because they served our interests. They have brought stability to regions that we kept unstable for profit. They fight with a dedication that our own forces have not shown in centuries. The Emperor rose from his crystalline throne, his massive form casting shadows across the court. Kthara were giants among galactic species, standing nearly 12 feet tall, with 4 powerful arms and natural armor plating that had evolved during their violent prehistory. They had conquered their homeworld through sheer brutality and had extended that philosophy to the galaxy at large. But that is not what concerns me most, Vexnathi continued, his golden eyes fixed on the display. It is their effect on the other species. The Valorans fight alongside them now, displaying a courage they never showed before. The Melari have requested human protection for their colonies. Even the Zenti are considering military cooperation with Earth. Diplomatic Counselor Yithare, a member of the telepathic Psion Collective, projected her thoughts directly into the Emperor's mind. The humans possess an unusual psychological influence, majesty. Their emotional patterns are infectious. Species that interact with them begin to display similar traits: loyalty, self-sacrifice, protective instincts. It appears to be a form of cultural contamination. The Emperor's mandibles clicked with interest. The Psion Collective had served as his intelligence network for over 1,000 years, their telepathic abilities making them invaluable for monitoring the loyalty of his subjects. If they were concerned about human psychological influence, the threat was real. "Show me," Vexnathi commanded. The air shimmered as Yithare projected a series of memories directly into the assembled court's minds. They saw human medical personnel working tirelessly to save alien casualties, despite having no obligation to do so. They witnessed human ships deliberately placing themselves between pirates and defenseless merchants, accepting damage to protect strangers. They observed human civilians volunteering for dangerous rescue missions to save alien colonists they had never met. Most disturbing of all, they saw the effects on the humans' allies. Valoran captains who had once fled from superior force now stood their ground when protecting human interests. Melari traders who had operated purely on profit motives began offering aid to distressed vessels. Species across the galaxy were beginning to form emotional attachments to their allies rather than maintaining the careful, calculating relationships that had defined galactic politics for millennia. "You see the problem," the Emperor said as the projections faded. "Humans are not just another species seeking power. They are a virus that threatens the very foundation of our civilization. They make others believe in concepts we have spent eons teaching them to abandon: honor, loyalty, self-sacrifice." Lord Admiral Hextah's scarred features twisted into a frown. Surely such primitive emotions make them weaker, not stronger. Honorable enemies are predictable. Loyal allies can be turned against each other through careful manipulation. Can they? Vexnathi gestured toward another section of the display, this one showing recent military engagements. Watch their response patterns. The court observed as human fleets reacted to threats against their allies. There was no hesitation, no political calculation, no careful weighing of costs versus benefits. When Valoran colonies were attacked, human ships responded immediately and with overwhelming force. When human vessels were threatened, Valoran reinforcements arrived with the same desperate urgency they would show for their own people. "They do not fight like rational beings," observed Chancellor Mordek of the Trade Federation. "They expend resources defending others that could be better used expanding their own power base." "Precisely," the Emperor agreed, "and that unpredictability makes them dangerous. We have maintained control of the galaxy for 3,000 years through careful manipulation of interspecies relations. We allow limited conflicts to prevent any single alliance from becoming too powerful. We encourage calculated selfishness to prevent emotional bonds from forming between potential enemies." He turned to face his court, his ancient eyes gleaming with cold intelligence. "Humans represent chaos. They form alliances based on emotion rather than logic. They fight for principles rather than profit. They inspire others to abandon the careful balance that has maintained peace for millennia. The irony was not lost on the more intelligent members of the court. The Kthara Empire's idea of peace was a galaxy kept in carefully managed conflict, where species exhausted themselves fighting each other instead of challenging Kthara supremacy. Actual peace, the kind humans seemed to be creating through genuine cooperation, was the Emperor's worst nightmare. "What do you propose, Majesty?" asked Yathare. Vexnathi smiled, an expression that had preceded the deaths of entire civilizations. "We will give the galaxy a demonstration of why emotional attachments are a luxury they cannot afford. We will show them what happens when primitive species attempt to upset the natural order." He gestured at the display, which shifted to show the Valoran home system. The Valorans have forgotten their place. They dare to stand as equals with species far younger and more primitive. We will remind them of the consequences of such presumption. Lord Admiral Hextah leaned forward eagerly. "A direct assault, Majesty? My fleets are ready." "Nothing so crude," the Emperor replied. "We will use their emotional attachments against them. The Valorans will be given a choice: abandon their human allies or watch their homeworld burn. And when they inevitably choose survival over sentiment, the galaxy will see the true value of human friendship." The plan was elegant in its cruelty. Kthara intelligence networks had mapped every human-Valoran joint facility, every cooperative venture, every symbol of their alliance. A coordinated strike would eliminate these targets while carefully avoiding direct attacks on human territories. The message would be clear: proximity to humanity was a death sentence. But the Emperor's masterstroke was the ultimatum itself. Valoris Prime would be surrounded by the full might of the Kthara First Fleet. Over 3,000 warships carrying enough firepower to sterilize the planet. The Valoran government would have exactly 24 hours to formally renounce their alliance with humanity and expel all human personnel from their territory. "The beauty of it," Vexnathi explained to his inner circle, "is that we win regardless of their choice. If they abandon humanity, we demonstrate the worthlessness of human protection. If they refuse, we destroy them and show the galaxy what happens to species that align themselves with chaos." 3 days later, Captain Sarah Chun sat in her ready room aboard the UES Indomitable, studying intelligence reports with growing alarm. The ship was now the flagship of humanity's Third Fleet, a far cry from the exploration vessels that had rescued Captain Zeth Key all those years ago. The Indomitable was a proper warship, built with everything humanity had learned about space combat in their brief, but violent encounters with pirates and hostile civilizations. "Admiral," her communications officer announced over the intercom, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Valoran Command." Chen activated the holographic display in her ready room, and Captain Zeth Key's familiar form appeared. He looked older now, his golden eyes dimmed with worry, and his usually perfect uniform rumpled as if he hadn't slept in days. "Sarah," he said without preamble, using her first name in a breach of protocol that spoke to their long friendship. "We have a situation. The Kthara Empire has issued an ultimatum to our government." Chun felt her blood run cold. The Kthara were the apex predators of galactic civilization, ancient beyond measure and utterly ruthless. Their empires stretched across half the known galaxy, maintained through a combination of overwhelming military might and psychological warfare. They had never directly threatened humanity before, content to ignore the young species as beneath their notice. "What kind of ultimatum?" she asked, though she suspected she already knew. Zethkey's image flickered as he transmitted a data packet. "They demand that we formally renounce our alliance with humanity and expel all human personnel from Valoran space within 24 hours. If we refuse, they will destroy Valoris Prime and every colony world in our system." The tactical display updated to show the Kthara fleet positioning: 3,000 warships in perfect formation around the Valoran home system. It was more firepower than most species had ever seen in one place, enough to crack planets and boil away atmospheres. The message was unmistakable. Resistance was futile. Chun studied the numbers with a professional eye. The combined human-Valoran fleet numbered less than 400 ships, and most of those were patrol craft and cargo vessels hastily converted for military use. In terms of raw firepower, they were outgunned by more than 7-1. Any conventional military analysis would conclude that the situation was hopeless. "What's the Valoran High Council's position?" she asked. Zethki was quiet for a long moment, his mandibles clicking with distress. "They are divided. Many believe we have no choice but to comply. The Kthara have never made an empty threat. If they say they will destroy our worlds, they will do it. And the others? The others remember what humanity did for us. They remember the kindness you showed when we were helpless in the void. They say that honor demands we stand with our friends, regardless of the cost." Chin closed her eyes, feeling the weight of command settle on her shoulders like a lead blanket. The rational decision was clear. Humanity should advise the Valorans to comply with Kthara demands. Earth was still a minor power. Humanity numbered in the mere billions compared to the Kthara's trillions. There was no logical reason to risk human lives in a conflict they couldn't possibly win. But logic had never been humanity's strongest suit. "Zethki," she said quietly, "what does your heart tell you to do?" The old Valoran captain's eyes brightened with something that might have been hope. "My heart tells me that some things are worth dying for. That friendship means nothing if it can be abandoned at the first sign of danger. That the galaxy needs to see at least one species willing to stand up to tyrants, even if it means destruction." Chen nodded slowly. "Then we stand together. Sarah, you don't understand. This isn't like fighting pirates or raiders. The Kthara Empire has existed since before humans discovered fire. Their technology, their numbers, their experience, I understand perfectly," Chen interrupted. "We're going to lose. Our ships will be destroyed, our crews will die, and it probably won't make any difference in the long run. But my grandmother once told me that kindness is never wasted. Neither is courage." She leaned forward, her expression intense. "Zethki, your people saved my life once. Not literally. I wasn't on that merchant ship, but you saved something more important. You proved that there was still decency in this galaxy, that there were still people worth fighting for." The Valoran captain's throat sac swelled with emotion. "The High Council will need a vote. If they choose to comply with Kthara demands, then humanity will stand alone," Chin said simply. "But I don't think they will. Your people remember what it means to be afraid and helpless. They remember what it felt like when strangers risked everything to save them. They won't abandon that." The transmission ended, leaving Chun alone with her thoughts and the weight of an impossible decision. She could order the human fleet to withdraw, leaving the Valorans to face Kthara wrath alone. It would be the sensible choice, the one that preserved human lives and resources for future battles. It was what any rational military commander would do. Instead, she activated her fleet-wide communication system. "All ships, this is Admiral Chun. Set course for the Valoran home system, maximum speed. We're going to war." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Across the fleet, crews that had served together for years began preparations with the quiet efficiency of professionals who knew they were probably going to die. There were no protests, no requests for clarification. Every human in the fleet understood what they were facing, and every one of them had made the same choice their admiral had made. As the fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace, Chun received a personal message from Earth. President Martinez, no relation to the doctor who had saved Valoran lives years earlier, appeared on her personal communicator. The leader of humanity looked tired, aged by the burdens of office, and the knowledge that she was about to send her people into a war they couldn't win. "Admiral," the president said formally, "I want you to know that what you're doing has the full support of the Earth government and the human people. We've seen the Kthara ultimatum, and we understand the stakes." Chen nodded. "Ma'am, I want to be clear about our chances. Even with Valoran support, we're facing odds of nearly 8-1 against an enemy with thousands of years of military experience. This isn't a battle we can win through superior tactics or technology." "I know," Martinez replied. But there are some things more important than winning, aren't there? My grandmother always said that the measure of a person or a species isn't how they act when they're strong. It's how they act when they're weak. The president paused, her eyes distant with memory. When I was young, Admiral, I asked my grandmother why humans always seemed to get involved in fights that weren't their business. Why we couldn't just mind our own affairs and stay out of other people's problems. Do you know what she told me? Chun shook her head. She said that some things are too important to leave to other people. That freedom and friendship and simple human decency don't defend themselves. Someone has to stand up, even when, especially when, the odds are impossible. The transmission ended, and Chun was alone again with her fleet and her conscience. In 12 hours, they would reach Valoran space. In 13 hours, they would face the most powerful military force in galactic history. In 14 hours, most of them would probably be dead. But they would die as humans had always died when faced with impossible odds, standing shoulder to shoulder with their friends, refusing to abandon those who needed them, proving that some things were indeed worth more than life itself. The galaxy was about to learn what humanity truly meant when they said they never forgot a favor. And the Kthara Empire was about to discover that sometimes the most dangerous enemy isn't the one with the biggest guns. It's the one with absolutely nothing left to lose. The Valoran High Council chamber fell silent as Chancellor Prime Kethmara called for the final vote. Around the circular chamber, representatives from every major Valoran world sat in contemplation, their golden eyes reflecting the weight of a decision that would determine the fate of their species. Above them, holographic displays showed the Kthara fleet in all its terrible magnificence. Thousands of warships arranged in perfect formation, each one capable of reducing a city to ash. The choice before us is simple, Kethmara announced, his voice carrying across the chamber with practiced authority. Comply with Kthara demands and preserve our species, or maintain our alliance with humanity and face certain destruction. Let each representative cast their vote, knowing that history will judge us by this moment. The voting began with the outer colonies, those most vulnerable to Kthara retaliation. One by one, they registered their decisions on the chamber's central display. The early votes were predictably cautious, survival over sentiment, pragmatism over principle. But as the tally progressed, something unexpected began to emerge. Representative Vorathai from the Kepler Mining Consortium stood slowly, his aged frame trembling with emotion. Honored colleagues, I cast my vote not just as a representative of my district, but as someone who remembers. 40 years ago, my youngest daughter was aboard the colony ship New Horizon when it suffered catastrophic system failure in the Outer Rim. No Valoran vessel could reach them in time. They were dying in the void, just as Captain Zethki once did. The chamber listened in rapt attention as Vorathai continued. It was a human patrol that found them. A single exploration vessel commanded by a young officer named David Kim. He had no obligation to risk his ship and crew for Valoran civilians. His government had given no orders to intervene. But he did it anyway, because he said it was the right thing to do. Vorathai's voice grew stronger. My daughter lives today because a human stranger chose compassion over caution. She has children now, my grandchildren, who exist because humanity refused to let our people die alone in space. How can I betray that kindness now, when they need us as desperately as we once needed them? The old representative's vote appeared on the display. Stand with humanity. One by one, other representatives rose to share their own stories. The agricultural world of Valoris Beta told of human agronomists who had volunteered to help during a crop plague, working tirelessly to save their harvest despite the risk of infection. The manufacturing hub of Valoris Gamma spoke of human engineers who had shared advanced fabrication techniques freely, asking nothing in return. Every world, it seemed, had some tale of human generosity, some moment when Earth's children had proven themselves to be more than mere allies. Captain Zethki, now serving as military advisor to the High Council, watched the vote tally with growing amazement. He had expected fear to triumph over gratitude, survival instinct to overcome sentiment. Instead, he was witnessing something unprecedented in Valoran history, an entire species choosing principle over self-preservation. The final vote was recorded, 847 in favor of maintaining the human alliance, 23 for compliance with Cathara demands. Chancellor Prime Kethmara rose solemnly. The decision is made. We stand with our human friends, whatever the cost. May the ancestors forgive us if we are wrong, and guide us if we are right. Across the galaxy, the announcement sent shockwaves through the established order. For the first time in recorded history, a member species had chosen to defy the Cathara Empire rather than abandon an ally. Ancient powers that had ruled through fear and manipulation for millennia suddenly found themselves facing something they had not encountered in over 3,000 years. Open defiance based on emotional loyalty rather than calculated interest. Emperor Vexathi received the news in his throne room with characteristic calm, but those who knew him well could see the fury burning beneath his controlled exterior. The Cathara had ruled through a carefully maintained reputation for invincibility. Any successful resistance, no matter how briefly it lasted, would encourage others to challenge their authority. Implement the punishment protocol, he commanded. Destroy the Valoran home system completely. Leave no survivors. Let this be a lesson to any other species that considers placing sentiment above survival. Lord Admiral Hexta bowed low. It will be done, Majesty. What of the human fleet? Crush them as well. Let the galaxy see what happens to those who encourage others to defy us. But as the Cathara fleet prepared for the systematic annihilation of Valoris Prime, something unexpected was happening across the galaxy. The news of the Valoran vote had spread like wildfire through the interstellar communication networks, and the response was unlike anything the established powers had anticipated. On the industrial world of Melaris, factory workers spontaneously walked off their jobs to volunteer for emergency military service. The Melari had never been warriors. They were traders and manufacturers, content to profit from the galaxy's conflicts without participating in them. But the image of the tiny human fleet rushing to defend their Valoran friends had stirred something in their collective consciousness. The Zenti Confederacy, known for their isolationist policies and careful neutrality, suddenly announced that their border fleets would conduct training exercises in the space adjacent to Valoran territory. It was a transparent fiction. Everyone knew the Zenti were positioning themselves to assist if the opportunity arose. Even more shocking was the response from the Psion Collective, the telepathic species that had served Cathara interests for over a millennium. Diplomatic Counselor Yithare found herself receiving unprecedented mental communications from her own people. Thousands of Psions expressing doubt about their service to an empire that would destroy entire civilizations for the crime of loyalty. The Cathara Empire's carefully maintained control was beginning to crack, and it was all because of a simple human principle. You don't abandon your friends. Admiral Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the UES Indomitable as her fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Valoran territory. Before them stretched the most daunting sight in galactic military history, the Cathara First Fleet arranged in perfect battle formation. 3,000 ships of varying classes, from massive dreadnoughts capable of cracking planets to sleek destroyers designed for precision strikes. Each vessel was a masterpiece of military engineering, representing technology and experience accumulated over millennia of conquest. Facing this armada was the combined human-Valoran fleet, 387 ships total, most of them patrol vessels, and converted merchant haulers hastily equipped with whatever weapons could be found. By every measure of military science, it was not a battle, but an execution. Admiral, her tactical officer reported, the Cathara fleet is hailing us. Put them through. The main screen shimmered and resolved into the image of Lord Admiral Hexta, his scarred features twisted into expression of contempt. Behind him, the bridge of his flagship was a monument to Cathara military power, all gleaming surfaces and holographic displays showing the disposition of his overwhelming force. Human Admiral Chun. Hextah spoke an accented but precise standard. I am Lord Admiral Hextah of the Kthara First Fleet. You will withdraw your forces immediately or be destroyed along with your Valoran friends. Chun stepped forward, her own bridge a study in practical efficiency compared to the Kthara display of grandeur. Her crew worked quietly at their stations, making final preparations with the calm professionalism that had become humanity's trademark. Lord Admiral, she replied evenly, I am Admiral Sarah Chun of the Earth Defense Force. We decline your demand. The Valoran Republic is under human protection, and we will not abandon our allies. Hextah's mandibles clicked with amusement. You are either very brave or very stupid, Admiral. My fleet outnumbers yours 8-1. Our weapons are more advanced, our armor stronger, our experience greater. This is not a battle you can win. You're probably right, Chun agreed. But, you see, Lord Admiral, we're not here to win. We're here to stand with our friends. Sometimes that's more important than victory. The Kthara commander's expression shifted from contempt to confusion. You will die for nothing. The Valorans will still be destroyed, and your sacrifice will accomplish nothing except to provide an example to other species of the futility of resistance. Chun smiled, and there was something in that smile that made Hextah uneasy despite his overwhelming advantage. That's where you're wrong. Our sacrifice won't accomplish nothing. It will prove that some things are worth dying for, and that proof will spread across the galaxy like a virus you can't contain. The transmission ended, and Hextah turned to his bridge crew with growing irritation. The human admiral's words had disturbed him in a way he couldn't quite articulate. In his 1,000 years of military service, he had faced countless enemies, desperate pirates, fanatical cultists, suicidal berserkers. But he had never encountered an enemy who seemed genuinely unafraid of death. Not because they were insane or drugged, but because they had made a conscious choice that their principles mattered more than their lives. Begin the attack, he commanded. Eliminate the human fleet first, then proceed with the planetary bombardment. The Kthara fleet moved forward with the inexorable precision of a galactic superpower. Their formation was a textbook example of military perfection. Heavy dreadnoughts in the center providing massive firepower, cruisers on the flanks for mobility, destroyers screening for smaller threats. It was a formation that had conquered 1,000 worlds and broken the will of entire species. The human Valoran fleet, by contrast, looked like a collection of misfits and outcasts. Their ships were mismatched in size and design, their formation loose and improvised. By all appearances, they should have been destroyed in the opening minutes of engagement. But appearances, as the Kthara were about to learn, could be deceiving. The battle began with a massive exchange of long-range fire. Kthara plasma cannons and particle beams lanced across space, targeting the largest human ships with surgical precision. Several human cruisers exploded in brilliant fireballs, their crews lost in moments. But something strange happened as the human fleet closed to engagement range. Instead of the expected panic and disarray, the surviving ships tightened their formation and increased speed. They flew directly into the teeth of the Kthara barrage, accepting terrible losses to get close enough for their weapons to be effective. They're insane, muttered Hextah's tactical officer as human ships continued their suicidal charge despite mounting casualties. No, Hextah replied, watching the display with growing unease. They're committed. The human fleet hit the Kthara formation like a hammer blow, their ships ramming through the carefully maintained battle lines with reckless abandon. Human captains who found themselves outgunned didn't retreat. They rammed their vessels into Kthara ships, trading their lives for damage to the enemy. Crews who found themselves on disabled ships didn't surrender. They rigged their reactors to overload and turned their vessels into improvised bombs. Most disturbing of all was the effect on their Valoran allies. Valoran captains who had served in the merchant marine for decades suddenly began displaying the same suicidal courage as their human counterparts. They followed human ships into impossible situations, covered human retreats with their own vessels, and fought with a ferocity that their species had never shown before. Captain Zeth Key, commanding the Valoran heavy cruiser Redemption, found himself leading a squadron of mixed human and Valoran ships against a Cathara battle group that outgunned them 3-1. His rational mind told him it was suicide, but his heart told him something different. "All ships, this is Captain Zeth Key," he transmitted to his squadron. "Today we fight not just for our worlds or our people, but for the idea that friendship means something. That loyalty is more than just words. That some things are worth any sacrifice." The Redemption and her escorts charged into the Cathara formation, their weapons blazing. Zethkey watched his old friend Elena Martinez's son, now Captain Martinez of the UES Compassion, ram his destroyer into a Cathara cruiser to save a damaged Valoran transport. He saw Valoran officers he had known for decades perform acts of heroism that would have been unthinkable just years before. And slowly, impossibly, the tide began to turn. It wasn't that the human Valoran fleet was winning. They were still massively outnumbered and outgunned. But their willingness to sacrifice everything was beginning to have an effect that went beyond simple mathematics. Cathara crews, accustomed to enemies who fought for conquest or survival, found themselves facing opponents who fought for something else entirely, for each other. The psychological impact was devastating. Cathara ships began to hesitate, their captains uncertain how to respond to enemies who seemed genuinely unafraid of death. Formations that had remained perfect for millennia began to waver as individual commanders found themselves questioning their orders. And then, just as it seemed the human Valoran fleet would be overwhelmed despite their courage, something unprecedented happened. Ships began dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Not dozens, but hundreds. Not for one species, but for many. The Zenti Confederacy had abandoned their training exercise pretense and committed their entire border fleet to the battle. The Melari Trade Union had hastily militarized their cargo vessels and sent them racing to Valoran space. Even individual ships from species that had never challenged Cathara authority arrived to join the desperate defense. Lord Admiral Hextile watched his tactical displays with growing alarm as the enemy fleet numbers continued to climb. "Where are they all coming from?" he demanded. His intelligence officer's voice was shaken. "Admiral, we're receiving reports from across the galaxy. Dozens of species are mobilizing their fleets. The rebellion is spreading." On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Chun watched the reinforcements arrive with a mixture of amazement and gratitude. She had hoped their sacrifice would inspire others, but she had never imagined anything like this. The galaxy was rising up, not because they thought they could win, but because they had been reminded of what it meant to fight for something bigger than themselves. Captain Zethkey's voice crackled over the communication system. "Admiral Chun, this is Captain Zethkey. It appears we are no longer quite so outnumbered." Chun smiled, tears streaming down her face as she watched former enemies and neutral parties racing to join their desperate battle. "No, Captain. It appears the galaxy remembers what friendship means after all." The battle raged for 18 hours, becoming the largest military engagement in galactic history. By its end, the Cathara First Fleet, the pride of an empire that had ruled for millennia, was in full retreat. They had not been defeated by superior firepower or tactical brilliance, but by something far more dangerous: the simple human concept that some things were worth any sacrifice. Emperor Vexnathi, watching the reports from his throne room, finally understood what he was truly facing. This was not a military rebellion that could be crushed with superior force. It was an idea, the idea that sentient beings could choose to care more about each other than about their own survival. And ideas, once released, were impossible to destroy. The Cathara Empire's 3,000-year reign of terror was ending, not with conquest or negotiation, but with the galaxy's rediscovery of its own conscience. And it had all begun with a simple act of kindness shown to a dying merchant captain in the depths of space. Years later, as representatives from dozens of species gathered to sign the new Galactic Charter, a document based on cooperation rather than domination. Captain Sarah Chun stood beside her old friend Captain Zeth Key on the observation deck of Galactic Unity Station. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had chosen differently?" Zeth Key asked, his golden eyes reflecting the stars beyond. Chun smiled, older now, but with the same kind eyes he remembered from their first meeting. "Every day. But then, I remember what my grandmother always told me. Kindness is never wasted. Sometimes it just takes time to grow into something bigger." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the ships of a dozen species working together to build a better future. In the distance, human and Valoran children played together in the station's educational center, their laughter echoing through the corridors like a promise of hope. The galaxy had learned that humanity never forgot a favor. They had also learned that when humans decided to repay kindness, they didn't just return it. They multiplied it across the stars until it became something powerful enough to reshape the very foundations of civilization. And, in the end, that may have been humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy. Not their technology or their courage, but their stubborn insistence that friendship, loyalty, and simple decency were not luxuries to be abandoned in hard times, but necessities that made life worth living among the stars.